I might rewrite the saga of Thorfinn Karlsefni as if it had never been written before, might tell the story of the first discovery of America, myself the discoverer, but I was entirely at Charlie's mercy, and so long as there was a 3 and 6 penny bond volume within his reach, Charlie would not tell. I dared not curse him openly. I hardly dared jog his memory, for I was dealing with the experiences of 1,000 years ago, told through the mouth of a boy of today, and a boy of today is affected by every change of tone and gust of opinion, so that he must lie even when he most desires to speak the truth. I saw no more of Charlie for nearly a week. When I next met him, it was in Gracechurch Street, with a bill book chained to his wrist. Business took him over London Bridge, and I accompanied him. He was very full of importance of that book and magnified it. As we passed over the Thames, we paused to look at a steamer unloading great slabs of white and brown marble. A barge drifted under the steamer's stern, and a lonely ship's cow in the barge bellowed. Charlie's face changed from the face of a bank clerk to that of an unknown and, though he might not have believed this, a much shrewder man. He flung out his arm across the parapet of the bridge, and laughing very loudly said, "When they heard our bulls bellow, the Scorlings ran away." I waited only for an instant, but the barge and the cow had disappeared under the bows of the steamer before I answered. "Charlie, what do you suppose are Scorlings?" "Never heard of them before. They sound like a new kind of seagull." "What a chap you are for asking questions," he replied. "I have to go to the cashier of the omnibus company yonder. Will you wait for me and we can lunch somewhere together? I have a notion for a poem." "No thanks, I'm off. Are you sure you know nothing about Scorlings?" "Not unless they've been entered for the Liverpool Handicap." He nodded and disappeared in the crowd. Now it is written in the saga of Eric the Red, or that of Thorin Karlsefni, that 900 years ago, when Karlsefni's galleys came to Leif's booths, and which Leif had erected in the unknown land called Markland, which may or may not have been Rhode Island, the Scorlings and the Lord and the Scorlings, and the Lord knows who these may or may not have been, came to trade with the Vikings and ran away because they were frightened at the bellowings of the cattle which Thorfinn had brought with him in the ships. But what in the world could a Greek slave know of that affair? I wandered up and down among the streets trying to unravel the mystery, and the more I considered it, the more baffling it grew. One thing only seemed certain, and that certainty took my breath away for a moment. If I came to full knowledge of anything at all, it would not have been the one life of the soul in one life of the soul in Charlie Mear's body, but half a dozen several and separate existences spent on blue water in the morning of the world. Then I reviewed the situation. Obviously, if I used my knowledge, I should stand alone and unapproachable until all men were as wise as myself. That would be something, but manlike I was ungrateful. It seemed bitterly unfair that Charlie's memory should fail me when I needed it most. Great powers above, I looked up at them through the fog smoke. Did the lords of life and death know what this meant to me? Nothing less than eternal fame of the best kind. That comes from one, and is shared by one alone. I would be content. Remembering Clive, I stood astounded at my own moderation, with the mere right to tell one story, to work out one little contribution to the light of literature of the day. If Charlie were permitted full recollection for 1 hour, for 60 short minutes of existence that had extended over 1,000 years, I would forego all profits and honor from all that I should make of his speech. I would take no share in the commotion that would follow throughout the particular corner of the earth that calls itself the world. The thing should be put forward anonymously. Nay, I would make other men believe that they had written it. They would hire bull-hided, self-advertising Englishmen to bellow it abroad. Preachers would be found a fresh conduct of life upon it, swearing that it was new and that they had lifted the fear of death from all mankind. Every Orientalist in Europe would patronize it discursively with Sanskrit and Pali texts. Terrible women would invent unclean variants of the men's belief for the elevation of their sisters. Churches and religions would war over it. Between the hailing and the restarting of an omnibus, I foresaw the scuffles that would arise from a half-dozen denominations, all professing the doctrine of the true metempsychosis as applied to the world and the new era, and saw, too, the respectable English newspapers shine like frightened kine over the beautiful simplicity of the tale. The mind leapt forward 100, 200, 1,000 years. I saw with sorrow that men would mutilate and garble the story, that rival creeds would turn it upside down till, at last, the Western world would cling to the dread of death more closely than the hope of life, would set it aside as an interesting superstition and stampede after some faith so long forgotten that it seemed altogether new. Upon this I changed the terms of the bargain that I would make with the lords of life and death. Only let me know, let me write the story with sure knowledge that I wrote the truth, and I would burn the manuscript as a solemn sacrifice. 5 minutes after the last line was written, I would destroy it all, but I must be allowed to write it with absolute certainty. There was no answer. The flaming colors of an aquarium poster caught my eye, and I wondered whether it would be wise or prudent to lure Charlie into the hands of professional mesmerists, and whether, if he were under his power, he would speak of his past lives. If he did, and if people believed him, but Charlie would be frightened and flustered, or made conceited by the interviews. In either case, he would begin to lie, through fear or vanity. He was safest in my own hands. "They're funny fools, your English," said a voice at my elbow, and turning round I recognized a casual acquaintance, a young Bengali law student called Grish Chunder, whose father had sent him to England to become civilized. The old man was a retired native official, and on an income of £5 a month contrived to allow his son £200 a year, and the run of his teeth in the city, where he could pretend to be the cadet of a royal house, and tell stories of the brutal Indian bureaucrats who ground the faces of the poor. Grish Chunder was a young, fat, full-bodied Bengali, dressed with scrupulous care in frock coat, tall hat, light trousers, and tan gloves, but I had known him in the days when the brutal Indian government paid for his university education, and he contributed cheap sedition to the Saki Durpan, and intrigued with the wives of his 14-year-old schoolmates. "That is very funny and very foolish," he said, nodding at the poster. "I am going down to the Northbrook Club. Will you come too?" I walked with him for some time. "You are not well," he said. "What is there on your mind? You do not talk." "Grish Chunder, you've been too well educated to believe in a god, haven't you?" "Oh, yes, here. But when I go home I must conciliate popular superstition and make ceremonies of purification, and my women will anoint idols, and hang up tulsi and feast the Purhoti, and take you back into the caste again, and make a good kutri of you again. You advanced free thinker, and you'll eat desi food, and like it all, from the smell in the courtyard to the mustard oil over you." I shall very much like it," said Grish Chunder unguardedly. "Once a Hindu, always a Hindu, but I like to know what the English think they know. I'll tell you something that one Englishman knows, and it's an old tale to you." I began to tell the story of Charlie in English, but Grish Chunder put a question in the vernacular, and the history went forward naturally in the tongue best suited for its telling. After all, it could never have been told in English. Grish Chunder heard me, nodding from time to time, and then came up to my rooms, where I finished the tale. "Bishak," he said philosophically, "lekin darwaza band hai, without doubt, but the door is shut. I have heard of this remembering of previous existences among my people. It is, of course, an old tale with us, but to happen to an Englishman, a cow-fed Melch, an outcast, but by Jove, that is most peculiar." "Outcast yourself, Grish Chunder. You eat cow beef every day. Let's think the thing over. The boy remembers his incarnations." "Does he know that?" said Grish Chunder quietly, swinging his legs as he sat on my table. He was speaking in his English now. "He does not know anything. Would I speak to you if I did? He did. Go on." "There is no going on at all. If you tell that to your friend, they will say that you are mad and put it in the papers. Suppose now you prosecute for libel. Let's leave out that question entirely. Is there any chance of his being made to speak? There is a chance. Oh, yes. But if he spoke, it would mean that all of this world would end now, instanto, fall down on your head. These things are not allowed, you know. As I said, the door is shut. Not a ghost of a chance? How can there be? You're a Christian, and it is forbidden to eat in your books of the tree of life, or else you would never die. How shall you all fear death if you know that what your friend does not know that he knows? I'm afraid to be kicked, but I'm not afraid to die because I know what I know. You are not afraid to be kicked, but you are afraid to die. If you were not, by God, you English would be all over the shop in an hour, upsetting the balances of power and making commotions. It would not be good. But no fear. He will remember a little and a little less, and he will call it dreams. Then he will forget altogether. When I passed my first arts exam in Calcutta, that was all in the cram book on Wordsworth. Trailing clouds of glory, you know. This seems to be an exception to the rule. There are no exceptions to the rule. Some are not so hard-looking as others, but they are all the same when you touch. If this friend of yours said so and so and so and so, indicating that he remembered all his lost lives, or one piece of a lost life, he would not be in the bank another hour. He would be what you call a sack because he was mad, and he would be what you called sack because he was mad, and you would send him to an asylum for lunatics. You can see that, my friend. Of course I can, but I wasn't thinking of him. His name need never appear in the story. Ah, I see. That story will never be written. You can try. I am going to. For your own credit, and for the sake of money, of course. No, for the sake of writing the story. On my honor, that will be all. Even then there is no choice. You cannot play with the gods. It is a very pretty story now, as they say. Let it go on that. At that. Be quick. He will not last long. How do you mean? What? I say, he has never, so far, thought about a woman. Hasn't he, though? I remembered some of Charlie's confidences. No woman has thought about him. When that comes, bus, how, yeah, all up. I know. There are millions of women here. Housemaids, for instance. They kiss you behind doors. I winced at the thought of my story being ruined by a housemaid, and yet nothing was more probable. Grish Chunder grinned. Yes, also pretty girls, cousins of his house, and perhaps not of his house. One kiss that he gives back again and remembers will cure all this nonsense, or else what? Remember, he does not know that he knows. I know that. Or else, if nothing happens, he will become immersed in the trade and the financial speculation like the rest. It must be so. You can see that it must be so, but the woman will come first, I think. There was a rap at the door, and Charlie charged in impetuously. He had been released from his office, and by the look in his eyes I could see that he had come over for a long talk, and most probably with poems in his pockets. Charlie's poems were very wearying, but sometimes they led him to speak about the galley. Grish Chunder looked at him keenly for a minute. I beg your pardon, said Charlie uneasily. I didn't know you had anyone with you. I'm going, said Grish Chunder. He drew me into the lobby as he departed. That is your man, he said quickly. I tell you, he will never speak all you wish. That is rot. Bosh. But he would be most good to make to see things. Suppose now we pretend that it is only play. I had never seen Grish Chunder so excited, and pour the ink pool into his hand. What do you think? I tell you that he could see anything that a man could see. Let me get the ink and the camphor. He is a seer, and he will tell us very many things. He may be all you say, but I'm not going to trust him to your gods and devils. It will not hurt him. He will only feel a little stupid and dull when he wakes up. You've seen boys look into the ink pools before. That is the reason why I'm not going to see it any more. You better go, Grish Chunder. He went, insisting far down the staircase that it was throwing away my only chance of looking into the future.